fair. Thank you all so much for being here. We are so excited to have this incredible cast, writer, director, this amazing show. Starting with Dichen Lachman.
First of all, what an amazing treat for us to be able to screen the movie for you guys here and to have an audience watch it and interact with it. And so thank you for coming out. We were making a TV show, and so, you know, in the dream when we're making this stuff, I think in a lot of our heads, it's like, oh, I'm pretending it's a movie. And here it was, got to be projected up there, and to hear the reactions and how, you know, engaged in the back and forth that's happening is just the best feeling. And yeah, the ending was always, you know, this idea that we were always headed towards for the season was that, you know, Mark would have to make this decision, and that image was always in our heads. And then, you know, when we finally, at one point we talked about possibly having Mark in the hallway looking between, you know, Gemma and Helly, and then leaving and ending the season there, and we thought we didn't want to do that because it might be just too much of a, you know, annoying. But and so it felt like it made sense for Mark to make this choice, and then it came down to like where are they running to, and this image that, you know, kind of was in our head of this freeze frame, which I feel like, yeah, does evoke, you know, for me, movies, my generation, even, you know, earlier 60s, and, you know, French New Wave stuff, and, you know, this idea of like ending a movie with what's gonna happen next, and introducing a new color to the show, kind of. And so we worked on it specifically, you know, and Adam and Britt practiced running down that hallway, and it was really, you know, the idea of going through these different emotions within that run, within that last shot of, you know, the sort of adrenaline and the, you know, the first blush of like, okay, we made this choice, and then kind of the eventual sort of like, now what happens? And so it was a fun process to work on, you know, realizing that shot, and then our color timer, Tom Poole, and worked on with our VFX team of being able to take our digital image, and that last shot, you know, we filmed it out on 35mm, and then then put it back in so we could have a freeze frame with some grain and just let it feel a little, you know, have some texture. And we just thought it was an exciting way to set up the next season, really, you know, because it's a lot of questions, and I think tonally it feels like, okay, where are we going?
And Dan, do I have it right that in an early iteration of the script, you didn't see Mark necessarily making that choice?
There were a couple of versions. Yeah, we had a version where we didn't show Mark making the choice, and again, it was going to be sort of this weird cliffhanger. I think I originally pitched a version of the scene. Sorry, Britt, without Helly in it. where Mark sort of makes the choice on his own, and it was, you know, sitting down and talking with Ben for a long time, and basically, you know, as with our first season finale, which you know, that was another one where in my first version, Mark was writing "She's Alive," and Ben was like, no, he's got to be like yelling it at the party, and so, you know, history repeats itself. Once again, it was like I sort of teed up this idea, and then Ben sort of came up with how to knock it out of the park.
He comes up with the idea, and then I do a little something to it.
But it's what made all the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what got us to that beautiful moment between Mark and Helly. So it's always that kind of collaboration.
I think also just Dan's writing is so inspiring to everybody because it's so evocative and so specific that it's always like making everybody, I think, come up with ideas and thought, and like it takes people places where our team now, we work on the show for 5 years, everybody really feels like they want to bring something to it, and there's a very collaborative nature to how the show is made.
So, Adam, as you're charting this really incredible dual character arc this season, what did you make of Mark's choice to end this season, and particularly for you as an actor playing Mark and Mark getting to that point at the end of the season?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the thing that was always there that we were kind of always charting and kind of navigating through was that at the beginning of the season, Innie and Outie Mark both have, you know, their interests are aligned, and Innie Mark is completely on board with getting Jenna out. That is issue number one, that is objective number one. He has to help his Outie out because this is a grave injustice, and emotionally he's on board as well. And then as the season goes on, their interests start to diverge a bit as all of the Innies are sort of going through adolescence of sorts and beginning to rebel and become more self-aware and think about their own lives and who they are and what they want. Mark is too, and so as their interests diverge, it sets Innie and Outie kind of on this collision course, and so eventually they have to communicate somehow, and Dan brilliantly came up with the idea of the video cameras, and so the ultimate choice, yeah, I mean, you know, I think that Innie Mark is thinking about what's right in front of him, and what's right in front of him is someone that he knows as Miss Casey, and, you know, going through the door would maybe mean the end of his life. He doesn't know, but also the person he's in love with is right down the hall, and so, you know, I don't think either of them are thinking that far ahead. They're just going with their gut and making a decision for themselves.
So, Britt and Dichen, the women on the other side, opposing sides of this door, you've spent this season, I feel like, really falling for both of your characters, and so it's an impossible choice for the viewer in some ways, but starting with Dichen, just sort of banging on the door, it's so raw. What do you remember about filming that moment, and kind of what it was like to see that action through the glass window?
Yeah, it was a very intense day, and we just kept going until it felt really organic and real. And I remember actually just like I kept crying a little bit afterwards because it just went so deep, like especially when you're shouting, you know, at the top of your lungs. It was wild.
They put padding up on the other side of the door because she was pounding.
But it was such a beautiful moment too for Innie Mark and Helly are. So as a fan, you know, you are really, really torn by it. But yeah, it was an intense day, right, Ben? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, it was such an important scene that, you know, you have that feeling when you come to, you know, you wake up in the morning and go, okay, this is like a really important scene. You don't want to screw it up, and you know, it was like that actual geography of that hallway, it's kind of like we've been stuck with that hallway since the beginning, and so many things happen in that little hallway, the exit hallway. So it was sort of like, oh, there's not really much you can do. I remember I had this idea for a shot of you, like when you're making the decision, where like I wanted the camera to like, it was like looking one way, looking the other way, and I wanted the camera to like come around with you as you turn around, and I kept on trying to do it, and I think I started to annoy you a lot. And you're at that point where you said, I don't know what you want. Because I had this idea, and then I realized like that's not gonna work, because I thought like maybe I had to do something special, but honestly, in any of these scenes, at the end of the day, the actors are really what you're watching, and the reality of that moment the actors are experiencing is what is the most important thing. So that's all, but they bought it that day. You guys came and invested so much in it as you did in all these scenes, and I truly believe that's why people connect with the show, is because you connect with these actors who are playing these characters and connecting with their own their own sense of their reality. Can I just say something? I just wanted to let you guys watch the series. A couple of other people worked on the series are here. Our first AD, Katie Pruitt, is here. Standing in the back there, our cinematographer and director of episode 7, Jessica.
Britt, I wanted to ask you about that very last look with Gemma. How did you get to that point as an actor? Where did you feel like Helly was in that moment?
Well, just to backtrack a little bit, the sort of any thesis of that episode is sort of occurring to Helly, I think, when she's standing on the tri-desk and remembering her friend Irving, and her brother Dylan has come back to fight with her, and she's seeing this sea of humanity in the marching band, and those lights go off that we remember from season 1 is like the last time she saw those was right before she went to the break room. And this is, like Dan said in one interview, like this is the moment when the Indies decide they want to exist. And so I think she just runs on a gut instinct to go see her friend, and she's also buoyed by like, oh, we have all this strength in numbers. It wasn't a choice at the beginning. We kind of were just like, well, we've got to get you out of here at least. And then they have numbers on their side. So she runs, and I think is surprised in that last moment, seeing Gemma and this heartbreaking scene on the other side of the hallway. And yeah, I mean, it was hard to look away. It was maybe Helly's first time connecting with someone on the outside and being like, wow, that's the person who loves the person that I love on the outside.
Complicated.
It's a love tetrahedron.
Yeah. Let's just keep expanding it with every season. This was a season of a lot of major reveals. For me, one of the biggest, Patricia, was the source of Severance being so directly tied to Cobell. And if I have it right, you were even surprised by the degree to which that detail was made, like how central she was to Severance.
Well, we did talk about, her being pivotal and that it meant a lot, and they did give me some kind of, indication of that. And I did imagine in my own head, without us talking, like, okay, how does that work in that world where we're all serving here in this old world, and part of the science brigade, and part of these different, things, and, how we were all, as young people, trying to work towards this thing, and then some person would make a little bit of a breakthrough, and then you would make another one and add on to that, and then another thing, and then some senior
adult would do something, and then you would add on to that, and then it would start logging together in your head, like the science fair. And you win that little bit, then you move up to the next thing. So, yeah, I think she was using the new technology of the time to realize Kier's dream, and every generation had moved it forward in some way. You look at ether, it's like the ultimate forgetting drug of the time, So this has all been moving towards this thing of, the truth is, being a human being and loving people is really painful.
Probably the last person I would have expected to bring Cobell back into the fold was Devin. And yet, she did. So Jen, what did you make of that decision and the fact that she really was kind of key to the entire events of the finale in a lot of ways?
I think she's at such an intense inflection point, she has no time to think. The baby's at home, she's pumping, okay? I really want to talk about the pumping today, okay? For anyone who's ever rested, I have not. But Devin did, and I was like, this woman, her body has gone through hell. She has a newborn at home, this now new fissure in her marriage because of Lumen. And she's, worried to the gills about her friend, who she now understands is alive, her sister-in-law, and of course, mostly her brother. So I think in that moment she realizes it's that plan or no plan at all, so she's running on pure instinct.
I like to imagine that while those really intense final finale events are going on, that Devin and Cobell are just in some weird carnival comedy. Michael, are you aware of the Ricken theories?
I've heard some rumors. What about him?
I'm curious, he's a figure who looms in a lot of ways. I'm just wondering how that informs the way you play him, given that everyone from the moment I feel like you were introduced had so many questions about him and how he would ultimately figure into the story.
Yeah, well, Dan's right here.
Why don't
Did
you
you
just
choose
tell us
Lumen because it sounds like Lumen? Is that right?
Yeah, he's Lumen.
Yeah, I truly, I don't have an opinion or knowledge, but I feel like I'm not going to say anymore.
What are some of the theories?
Well, they range. There's one that some people thought that the family would be about him. Entirely.
Okay.
There are those who think that there is a separate self that is connected to Lumen,
Okay.
Ricken,
Oh, interesting.
and others.
Was there something about him being a goat?
Yes.
A lot of random people in my life have been sending that one around. To my wife's colleagues and distant workers.
Dan, you got me.
Goats are cool.
I like Dan just quietly nodding.
Well, can I just say, it's okay, it's a Ricken adjacent theory, but it's one that I kind of want to put to bed here. And that is that a lot of people have pointed out Rebecca from season 1 mentions having swords on the back of her head from her bird, and people have taken that to mean that they think Rebecca is lying, she doesn't have a bird, and that she's severed. And I want to say, I am not here to confirm or deny that Rebecca is severed. She might be, but she has a fucking bird. And that bird is an asshole and is trying to kill her. And I will not stand for its erasure. The bird is free.
We are grateful.
Great here.
One other incredible finale sequence I want to talk about is the marching band sequence. Tramell, how did you do it? Walk us through what really was a pretty short of war, I think.
Oh, well, thank you. So, I mean, I can't take credit for the band. I mean, it was the genius of Ben and Dan to bring in choreography and merriment. And, I told them, I said, listen, when we had finished season 1 and we had been renewed for season 2 and we were talking about the track of Milkshake for season 2, I said, I really don't want to dance in season 2. Because, the music dance experience was iconic in of itself, and you can't recreate that moment. It was beautiful. And then I heard, there's a marching band. And I said, wait. Is there a band? And how do I play into this? And so there was a choice of whether or not he would be the band director or the drum major. And I graduated from an HBCU, and I graduated from Jackson State University, and they have the Sonic Boom of the South, and that was a big, iconic band for me. And so when the opportunity came to serve as drum major, I said, I am living my dreams. So I said, let's go, let's suit up, and we had a great time. It was so much fun.
Zach, what was it like to keep him at bay?
Scary. He was really kicking that thing. He was like the Terminator. Yeah, it's scary.
That's a real moment of triumph for Amy Dillon. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't even know if he has any time to process that. He's just gone through this whole existential moment where he didn't think he would maybe even be alive today, and then he's told that he's here, and he reads that letter from his Audi, and kind of they reach some sort of detente briefly, it seems, where they have a shared understanding that there are pieces of each of them that help the other one, and then he hears this band, and then he shows up, and his friend is in the midst of more shenanigans. So I think he's just trying to help out, especially because he spent a lot of this season kind of alienating himself from the rest of the group. So it is this moment, but I don't know if it really feels like a triumph to him, because it's scary, like I said.
It felt like a triumph to Helly that you came back.
It's a big something moment for everybody watching. Sarah, I'll go to you next. I'm just curious what it was like kind of joining this cast this season. If there was something about the way that the set worked, the way that everyone was working together that really surprised you or excited you.
Yeah, I was so excited. I'm a huge fan of the show, and I'm a huge fan of all these people, so it was insane to get to meet them. But yeah, walking on set after watching season 1, it's so immersive and it looks just like it does on the show. So I think after spending 10 hours a day in there, you start to feel like, oh my gosh, these wet hallways are claustrophobic. But it was really good for the acting. But I felt like I was on a really immersive fan experience for 2 years.
Last finale scene I want to talk about is this confrontation between the two of you here.
You're much more helpful. You may have to, okay.
What would you like to know?
How did you guys rehearse it? How did you block it? Walk us through the moments before you actually saw on camera.
Well, it was pretty intense. Even with our incredible stunt people who do most of the physical work, it was 3 days full on. I remember, the moment I fall out of the elevator at the end, which is basically the last thing I do, and my back gave out, and I was like, can someone just help me out? But it was really rewarding though, and we really tried not to hurt each other. It didn't always work. But no, it's some of the most enjoyable things I think I've ever done. And
do you want to talk about when you gave Adam a concussion?
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't. Well, mean, Adam has been really nice, Ben. Thank you for pointing that out. Adam has been saying it was his fault. So maybe we should just believe Adam. But that was a horrible, like, you don't want to, the first thing you do is take Adam and just slam him against the wall. And then you have the rest of the day left. I was sitting in my chair just like, I just wanted to cry and go home.
It's awful, but it does look great. Don't we look real?
Well, oh yeah, the shot is in there. But when he after he punches Adam in the nose and he slams him into the wall, that's a real hit.
I ended up going, because I did screw up and my arm got caught behind, I was supposed to brace myself and absorb the energy into my arm, and it got caught behind, so I went head first into the wall. And after I kind of took a moment, Ben came over and he was like, all right, you okay? All right? Okay, it looks great. That's gonna be in the show, guaranteed.
What I will say is that as someone that has done a fair amount of fights, we were incredibly well rehearsed and very well taken care of in terms of planning out the story, exactly what our moves were we comfortable, and I have lived to tell the tale that these things do happen. So it was, unfortunate things do tend to happen. Some of which I haven't revealed about myself, but that'll be in my book. But it was a phenomenal experience.
I mean, it is fun, but it has to be said, it's really hard to, when you're doing that choreography, because you're doing the acting, you also just want to be precise, and you don't want to hurt people. So I find it's the moments where you have to be most focused when you're acting, is because you're really taking care of so many things at the same time. But it was, and getting to see it on the screen, it looks awesome. So.
Yeah. My favorite part was when I'm on the ground and you guys are fighting, I got to lay down and have a front row seat to watch Brienne and Dari.
I am also curious, knowing how meticulously you all make the show, Adam, how much blood was there in this particular sequence?
There was a lot of blood, and we did it, I think 3 or 4 times, the actual puncture and then the blood coming out. And one of them, there was too much pressure built up in the pump, and it was like a full hose splash of blood in my face. I'm sure there's footage of that. That was crazy. And so I would have to get completely cleaned up and change clothes and everything, so we could only do it 3 or 4 times. But yeah, there was a lot of blood, and it was everywhere.
I'm glad I asked. Tramell, I also wanted to ask what it was like acting with the animatronic, which I believe is this man to my left.
Yeah, so this was my first time acting with Ben Stiller.
Sort of. I mean, yeah. I mean, I was operating the remote control of the animatronic. But Mark Geller, who plays Keir Egan, a wonderful actor who is Keir Egan, and he's the face of Keir Egan, and he does the voice of Keir Egan, came to set that day, and he was playing Keir. So Mark was reading the scene with Tramell so they could get the timing right, and I was trying to time out the animatronic turns and to land the jokes. Sorry about it. It was probably one of my most enjoyable days on set. I just thought it was such you were so funny, but yet then it gets uncomfortable, and I just thought it was such an interesting scene that Dan wrote. It's another thing Dan wrote this I remember when you wrote that thing, and I was it made me so happy. Do you remember when you came up with it?
Yeah, it was kind of out of nowhere. There was just the sort of directive going into writing that scene was have Milchick introduce the band, and I was like, okay, well, I originally wrote ladies and gentlemen, choreography and merriment, and then it was well, what if you talked to the statue for just like one line? And then that became like a page and a half.
Maybe throw in a few more jokes.
Yeah. Well, when I originally was writing, I was like, man, it's gonna be so mad. Like, I did something this wasn't supposed to, and then I showed it to Ben, and it was just pure bliss.
Yeah.
And he was like, more.
You really feel it. You feel the joy, and then it's so uncomfortable at the same time. It's a really incredible scene. Well, let's wrap by looking slightly ahead as much as we're comfortable. Dan and Ben, are there any big questions you're excited to answer in season 3?
I was excited to be able to answer that there would be a season 3. Yeah. And I think that's literally all I can say.
I mean, there are definitely things that we can't talk about that we want to, address that I think are out there. And there's like a list in the writers' room, of unanswered questions that we know are hanging out there.
It's a book.
Yeah. But that's the thing. So I think the things that people think about. I mean, that's the show. Like we're always trying to figure out how to make it satisfying enough, but also allow the weirdness to continue too. But serving the story ultimately for where we're headed to.
Congrats on an incredible season, guys. And thank you guys so much.